Hey, I'm Rue, and if you're new here, I'm an adventure filmmaker that works with some of the biggest outdoor brands in the outdoor industry. Whether it's climbing or surfing or skiing or mountain biking or any other discipline in the outdoors, odds are that I filmed it, and odds are that I filmed it with these lenses. To be totally transparent, I'm giving you 5 lenses that I think are the best for adventure filmmaking. I only own 4 of them. The reason being, I don't think that having more lenses and having more gear makes you a better filmmaker. I think being a better filmmaker, especially in the outdoor adventure space, revolves around storytelling and how you can communicate the emotions and the epicness and the scale of what's happening out there, emotionally or physically. So, while these lenses are really important, and I will walk through them, remember that not having this gear does not mean that you are not able to make a good outdoor film. My first outdoor film I made entirely with this one lens. I didn't have any other lenses, and it still went on and was selected to film festivals and did decently well. The client was happy with it, the film festivals were happy with it, and I had one lens. And it doesn't even have to be this specific lens, it's just that focal range that allowed me to do what I needed to do to capture the story. In this video, I'm gonna walk you through these 5 lenses, what I like about them, what I don't like about them, and why, regardless of brand or full frame or crop sensor or whatever kind of camera you have, hopefully this video will give you the basis of what I use in my career to create the films that I create. So with that, let's dive into these 5 lenses. The first lens, and in my opinion, my favorite lens, which I've talked about time and time again on this channel, is the 24-105. This is the Sony f4 24-105, but whether you have a Sony, or you have a Nikon, or a Canon, or any other type of camera, I am advocating for this lens because I believe that this focal range is one of the best for what we do as adventure filmmakers. I am often in situations where I am limited by access when it comes to creating the films that I create. And I don't necessarily mean access to characters, I mean literally physical access. If I'm on a rock wall, it's pretty hard for me to move around really quickly because I'm on ropes, the athlete's climbing. If it's a sort of expedition style climb, I'm trying to ascend the rope faster than the climber's climbing and get in a good shot and get shots quickly and right away without having to do tons and tons of setup. If I'm skiing and I'm skiing with a professional athlete who's much faster than me, having a lens like this where I can get a wide shot, a medium shot, and a tight shot all with one lens can be really helpful in the storytelling of the overall expedition. If I'm surfing, I'm filming on a different lens, which we'll walk through. But a lot of these situations, I'm limited by how many shots I can get in a short amount of time. So having something where I can be at 24 and get a really wide shot, punch into a medium shot, and then punch into a really tight shot, all in the span of 30 seconds, can really help in the storytelling of a lot of these adventure films. I like this specific lens from Sony a lot as well because it's optically stabilized, so partnered with the stabilization in my Sony a7S III and the stabilization in the lens, I find that I often don't need to be carrying gimbals or tripods and can really lighten the load when you're on long days out with these athletes in the mountains. But again, it doesn't have to be this specific brand. I just encourage you to look out for the 24-105 in general. One final thing too is I get asked a lot about the 24-70 compared to the 24-105 because often the 24-70 has a faster aperture. So this is f4 and the 24-70 can be f2.8, which can really help with getting that blurry background and make things look and feel maybe a little bit more cinematic. I will say in the outdoors, sometimes I'm not always shooting at f1.8 when I'm able to. Filming fast-moving subjects like skiers or mountain bikers or filming through cracks, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of forgiveness when it comes to focus because I would so much rather my shot be in focus and have a little bit wider of a depth of field than be really shallow and me missing focus all the time. I'm relying a lot on autofocus when I'm out in these environments, so I feel like the f4 nails it like 99.9% of the time if I'm using the right autofocus setting, which I use zone on my camera if anyone's curious. But that is the reason that I recommend the 24-105. I think the reach and the added zoom value is more important than having a faster aperture. All right, now that we've talked about my favorite zoom lens, the rest of the lenses that I'm gonna talk about are all prime lenses. The reason I only have one zoom lens is because this kind of covers the range of everything. I'll talk about the second favorite zoom lens that I have that I use on some productions, but I don't own it because I don't use it that often, so I'll talk about that at the end. But for now, let's jump into the prime lenses. Next, we're gonna talk about my favorite prime lens for action filmmaking. So capturing action is a little bit difficult because we know when we're there how fast these athletes are moving and how big and crazy it may seem. In order to highlight that speed and their agility and their finesse, I love using this 14mm wide angle lens. This is f1.8, it's from Sony, it's a G Master, but again, whatever brand of camera you have, if it's a crop sensor, if it's a full frame, if it's a Canon, if it's Nikon, if it's Olympus, I don't know, if it's any other type of camera, that's totally okay. But having a wide angle lens like this can really capture that scale and that action in an amazing way. This is my favorite lens to bring onto climbing shoots where I have a little bit more control and can stage the athletes. This is my favorite lens for surf filmmaking. When you can get the athlete right close next to you on a wide angle lens, it looks amazing. Even for filming mountain biking or skiing, having this wide angle can really bring that larger to life moment into reality and make it feel larger than life, because in the moment it does. If you've ever filmed skiing and a skier whips past you, you know that adrenaline and that speed that's coming, and capturing it on a wide angle lens, in my opinion, is the best way to capture that action. If you put this thing on a gimbal and you're skiing down next to somebody, it's gonna be even better. In my opinion, a wide angle lens and fast movement is an awesome combination. So I love this. I won't use this as much if I don't have a lot of control over the environment in which I'm shooting. So if I'm shooting an expedition or an event sort of moment for a documentary, like some sort of race or specific moment that's happening, I'm gonna be on the zoom lens. But if I'm doing sort of commercial style projects, more branded documentary style projects where we've storyboarded and we've scripted out a little bit more of what we want, I love using this wide angle lens to capture the action. It's not great for portraits or close-ups of human faces. It's a very stylized look. If that's what you're looking for, totally go for it. But I find that athletes doing things, this is a really fun lens to capture things on. Next, we're gonna talk about the Sony 85mm. This is an awesome lens for close-ups. Obviously 85mm is a little bit more zoomed in, but I love using this lens for textures, whether it's on the human face or not. For close-ups of emotions or just generally detail shots of landscapes, this is a really great lens to consider having in your bag. I think capturing pine needles in the snow or waves at the beach, this lens does a really great job of capturing the texture of the outdoors. To contrast from the wide angle, which you might only use for action shots and landscapes, I think it's important to have lenses of wide, medium, and tight. This is the tight option. So anytime that you would imagine using a tight lens, I'd recommend using this one. The shallow depth of field on this is incredible. I don't use this lens too often, again, because I'm often on the 24-105. But again, when I'm staged for a commercial style thing, or when I have the luxury of staging an athlete for a specific shot, I love jumping on this to get that shallow depth of field. Shooting like really close-up shots of eyes, especially shots of eyes in the snow, can be fantastic on this. If you're a climber or climber filmmaker, getting a shot of hands or fingers going onto crimps with this lens will look amazing. Basically anything that you could imagine being really close up for, this will be awesome. It's not great for landscapes, it's not great for capturing action, but it does do a really good job of communicating the details and the texture of the outdoors. So you may notice there's only 3 lenses here, and the reason being is the 4th lens is on the camera, so let's swap that out now. All right, you may notice that the shot looks a little bit different now. We've changed lenses. The blooms and the highlights might be a little different. You might be able to see more of the background, and that's because I'm now shooting on my 24-105 at f4. And before, I was shooting on the 35mm prime lens at f1.8 with a Pro Mist filter at the end. I just have a bunch of step-up rings on this, but all this goes off, and this is what the lens normally looks like. So it's actually really compact, a lot smaller than all of this, but I do like having Pro Mist filters at the end of my prime lenses when I'm indoors because I think it looks pretty nice. A big reason I love this lens is exactly why I use it on all of my talking head setups is I think 35mm is a great lens to just communicate most of daily life that happens. Whenever I'm handheld or doing interviews, I often have a 35mm prime lens on. Whenever it makes sense, I like having the option to go down to f1.8. I like the 35mm focal length because I think you can still get a wide shot if you back way up. You can still get close-ups if you step way in. And that medium shot is a really easy shot to get and looks pretty good most of the time. Whether it's an interview, a talking head setup, in the moment interview, a general action shot that's happening, somebody on a bike or skiing or climbing, you can kind of communicate the story really effectively with this focal length. There's not too much that I want to say about the 35mm other than it's my most used prime lens. I love having something super small that looks great indoors, that looks awesome outdoors. I'll replace this Pro Mist filter with an ND filter whenever I'm outside. So this just simply unscrews and I keep all the step-up rings on, and then I put my ND filter on it, which I think is fantastic to have step-up rings on all these lenses. So you can see that I actually have a step-up ring on my 85 and my 35, and that's so that it uses all the same filter thread length. Instead of having 5 different ND filters or 5 different Pro Mist sizes, I have one Pro Mist filter, and I actually have 2 ND filters, but that's often for like B cameras. But I'm able to just swap ND filters through all of my lenses so they're all the same filter thread, and I'm not constantly having to put step-up rings or buy different ND filter sizes. So that's the reason for these step-up rings. The autofocus on this is great. The colors are great. I think it has like just the right amount of character. I think it's really sharp and really like tactile perfect. So having the Pro Mist filter at the end of it inside can help soften some skin tones a little bit. Being outside, I put an ND filter and that tends to soften things a little bit as well. But for the most part, it's just like a clinically great lens. If you're making something for a brand or you're making something that just wants to look great, putting both of these at f1.8, the 85mm and the 35mm, you can shoot almost everything. These two are also my go-to interview lenses. So the 35 is almost always my A cam when it comes to interviews, and 85mm is almost always my B cam. If you're interested in learning how I set up interviews for adventure films, both interviewing outside in bright snow or in the trees or inside for a lot of the work that I create, feel free to drop a comment and maybe I'll get to it at some point this year. All right, I got one more lens to talk about, but let's get this 35mm prime back on the camera. All right, now that looks a little nicer, let's talk about this last lens. This last lens I don't actually own. So take this all with a grain of salt that if I were to get a 5th lens and I felt like this was necessary, this is what I would get. It's the 100 to 400mm lens. A lot of different brands have something similar to this. Sigma sells a 100 to 400, Sony sells a 100 to 400. Maybe it's 100 to 500, but regardless, it's just a big telephoto lens. The 70 to 200 is often what people go towards, but I think having 105mm, I don't necessarily need a lens for 80 more millimeters. I think what really matters, especially with adventure films, is having that big extra telephoto distance. The reason I don't own it is because I'm not often filming surfing from the beach or filming climbing from the bottom. I'm often the guy that's on the rock wall with the climber or in the ocean with the surfer.
I just want to show you guys Rue's dedication as a cameraman, who, same facial expression and all, did 3 separate takes of this selfie top-out video. If you're wondering at any point in this video, wow, that's amazing that they got that shot, you can probably thank this man.
But I think having a big telephoto lens in those 2 environments is really, really helpful. For instance, when I went to Senegal and I made a surf documentary series about a few environmentalists in Senegal, we filmed most of the surfing on this 100 to 400 lens. If you put a 2x teleconverter on it, that lens is just absolutely crazy. You can capture tons of detail of surfers from the beach. Same goes for climbing. If you are posted up across the valley, you can get great shots of climbers from the rock wall. If you find that you're filming subjects from that telephoto distance often, like definitely consider the 100 to 400. I use it, it's awesome. So to recap, you got 2 zoom lenses. You got this 24 to 105 for basically everything you need. You have the 100 to 400 for all your telephoto needs from filming climbers or filming surfers from the beach. You have your wide angle 14mm to capture all the action. You have your 85mm prime lens to get great detailed close-up shots of hands or eyes or snow, and then you have your 35mm, which is your running gun daily going through life at 24 frames per second and seeing what you capture. Those are the 5 best lenses for adventure filmmaking in my opinion. All the links to what I use are below, as well as a few other options in case you want to check out and go shopping for yourself or for others. But again, just to reiterate, the great films don't come from buying these lenses. Great films come from practicing, getting out in the mountains, getting out in the ocean, and making films for yourself. So with that, thanks so much for watching. I love you, proud of you. See you in the next video.